Blind Citizens Australia proudly presents the Entrepreneurial Mindset webinar series. Brought to you in partnership with Vision Australia. Webinar 3, Business and Assistive Technology.
We start our webinar this evening by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all meeting from today. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia. As we gather for this physically dispersed meeting, let us take a moment to reflect upon the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we gather today. Tonight's webinar topic is Business and Assistive Technology. This is the third of 6 webinars in BCA's The Entrepreneurial Mindset webinar series delivered in partnership with Vision Australia. If you missed the first 2 webinars, recordings can be accessed by the An Eye for Business page on BCA's An Eye to the Future website. Finally, we have a special offer from Small Business Australia for any currently registered small business owners in attendance today. Please stay tuned at the end of the webinar for more details. That completes our housekeeping for tonight's webinar. I'll now hand over to Robin McKenzie to begin our panel discussion. Robin?
Thanks, Christina. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you stay on after today's webinar and join us for the remaining webinars in this Entrepreneurial Mindset series. I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about myself before I introduce the panel and we get things going. Many of you will probably know me, Robin McKenzie. I'm a former executive officer at BCA. Once I left BCA, I went on to manage the Disability Advocacy Resource Unit, which operates out of VCOS, the Victorian Council of Social Service. And after that, I went on to manage a program at AFDO, the Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, as part of their information linkages and capacity building funded project to assist small national and state organisations of and for people with disability to be or become sustainable in the new funding environment that the NDIA and the My Aged Care system was bringing into place at the time. And now I'm studying a graduate certificate in career counselling. And I, like you, plan on becoming a business owner who is blind or vision impaired and starting my own career counselling and coaching business. So I hope to start that next year. So I've got a bit of a vested interest in this whole webinar series, and certainly today have very much of a vested interest in hearing what our panellists have to say about the business world and the use of assistive technology and how it can assist us to maintain our business. So let's get to hear from our panellists so that you understand who it is that will be talking to us today. First up, Elise Lonsdale from Data Australasia. Welcome, Elise. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got your business Data Australasia started?
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Robin, Christine, David, and other people who have joined us tonight on the webinar. Thank you for your time. Yes, well, basically, I was living in New Zealand and I came back to Australia and I always wanted to get a job with a leading blindness organisation, which I did for 12 months. It was only a 12-month fixed-term contract. And coming to the end of that 12 months, it was pretty clear that the regional manager had no intentions of extending that contract. So we had to do something, and we had to do something relatively fast. So what we did is we sat down one Sunday morning on a very, very interesting Australia Day weekend when it was holidays and everybody was still sort of in holiday mode going, what next? Because we know the contract won't be renewed. It was pretty obvious. So we re-registered the old Lonsdale media, and I thought, well, that's an option to go back to, but web design is something that I'm pretty much over. So what we then did was we needed to, well, I decided that there's so many people who are unemployed in the blindness fraternity. The statistics are absolutely shocking in this day and age. They really are, for the amount of low vision and blind people who are out of work. I wasn't going to be one of them. And I love what I do and I do what I love. So why don't we keep doing that? So we need a new business name, and it's easy to register a business name these days. So we sat down. The hardest thing was to come up with a name. And my friend's husband, David, another David, not the one that's on channel tonight, sort of threw a few disability type words and accessibility and assistive and all that. And all of a sudden came out of the mix was Disability and Assistive Technology Access Australasia. So that's a bit of a mouthful. So we shortened it down to Data Australasia, and that's how it came about. So we went straight onto the where we register business websites and did it that morning. That was it. So Data Australasia officially existed from that weekend onwards. So naturally, the job ended, as we knew it was going to. So what do we do next? Well, we just go straight out and work. So I did. People followed me, and I went that very same day that I left. I was on Facebook creating a business page. I thought, I've got to do a website, but let's get the business page up first because that's easier to do. So I always believe in doing the easy stuff first. So I did the Facebook page, and I think I put some tweets out. I got onto VipL and I said, well, I've left the organisation I was working for, and I would like to let everybody know that I'm here. So off I went, and it just basically word of mouth. And it was almost like walking out of one job into another. Because as I said, I was not going to be, it just wasn't an option to be unemployed. I didn't fight tooth and nail to come home from New Zealand to render myself as unemployed. It was just not an option.
Let me stop you there, Elise, because we'll continue on your journey in a moment. We just want to hear from David Woodbridge, the other panel member for today. So David Woodbridge from Vision Australia, as you're the National Advisor on Access Technology at Vision Australia. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I'm sure many of us on the chat today already know who you are, but can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what the work is that you do to assist people who are blind or vision impaired to make the most out of assistive technology in their day-to-day lives?
Sure. So hi, everyone. As Robin said, I'm David Woodbridge. I've been now working officially for the old Royal Blind Society of New South Wales and Vision Australia, now coming up to 33 years, which sounds like a very, very long time. And in those years, I spent the first 15 years being an access technology consultant or assistive technology consultant. And that was basically assessing, recommending, installing and training assistive technology for blind and low vision for home, education and vocation, so employment. And I was also part of a team that also ran or supported the help desk at Vision Australia. And I was also, back then, we used to proofread all the reports. So when the technology consultants particularly wrote workplace reports, it was my job to verify that all the reasoning, arguments, factual information was all correct. So that was the first 15 to 17 years of my job. The last 15 years, 16 years or so, I've been involved in evaluating technology and how it can be implemented, again, across home, education and work. And funnily enough, I have a sort of a second job and a few people that actually work in the job access, which is where you get funding for equipment. There's a couple of people that actually use me to also vet and read their reports as well. So I've literally been reading workplace reports for 3 decades. And the good thing about that is actually it keeps me up to date with what's going on in technology and what's going on in the workplace. So even though I'm not doing direct client work, reading reports really keeps me in focus. So that's basically me in a nutshell.
And that's a really good strategy that we've found, that a lot of people who have that entrepreneurial mindset, they're people who are good at expanding and building on their networks and finding ways to informally and formally gather knowledge and information about their area of expertise or the area in which their business operates. So that's a really good tip already that you've given us there, David. Thank you, Elise and David, for letting us know a little bit about yourselves. Elise, over to you. where we left you in your introduction, you're telling us what led you to making the decision to start a business. So can you remember day one, week one, month one?
Yeah, I can.
What were the first things that you were having to set up for yourself?
Well, firstly, I just I need to set up an invoicing system. Now, I had some of the old infrastructure from Lonsdale Media left over, so I just, sort of had an old manual invoice system. As I said, we had to register a business, which we did. And then I basically just kept working, apart from the fact I needed to rebuild a client database because the clients, I didn't have access to all the former clients, although word got round so people could look me up. And I think, as I said, the first thing was to set up a social media and a web presence, which I did. I went off and built a website. I was also fortunate enough at the time, I was hired to build a website for somebody else who's also in the disability and advocacy sector as well, a well-known blind lady here in Melbourne. So I sort of built the two websites together, one for her and one for me. So that was the first thing, was to get a website up, as I said, to register the business name. And I hammered along on a manual invoicing system, I guess, until I really got jack of it, and I was probably, probably 2 years into my business. And a lot of businesses do, I work with a lot of people who are on the NDIS. I work with plan managers. I build relationships with plan managers, participants. I talk to people because I also, that's very same year, two other really cool things happened too. And it gets back to networking, exactly what you said, Robin. I started the Blindness and Beyond Independent Referral Network, which is a network of myself, Mark Muscat, and a few others, Mark Muscat in Queensland and a number of others, Adam Morris. We all are involved in this, I guess the independent movement really is what it is, so that we are now building a very good list and network of O&Ms. We've only got one occupational therapist, but have we got none at the moment? I have to look up on that, but we've got plenty of O&Ms, access technologists, and of course, access technology can be a pretty broad church. So there'll be people there with expertise I don't have, and I'll have expertise that others don't have. So of course, again, it gets back to that networking. We've got somebody to lean on for support. So building a network is one of the things I did in the first year. Also, using the networks you had when I was employed in my first year back in Australia, I also spent some time building a network in the Apple User Society of Melbourne. And I did a presentation there one day, and it just so happened that a lady from the Statewide Vision Resource Centre here in Melbourne, which is quite well known here and quite well respected, Marion Blaze, saw me present. So I think she may have seen me do one of my previous presentations under my former employer. So she contacted me, and that has led to a very, very rewarding, what town amounts to now about a 4.5-year relationship with that organisation, working 1 day a week. So business can be a pathway to employment, even as you run your business, or should you, which is what happened to the old Lonsdale Media, should you ever decide to shut down your business and move into employment, which is what I did when I went and worked in Perth. But getting back to your original question, basically just getting out there, putting yourself forward in every way possible, talking to people, talking to other blind members of the community, because we're a pretty tight-knit and small community relative to other communities that are out there. So it just grew from that, really. And then as I knew the business was working, then I put in things like better bank accounts, hired a bookkeeper, which is more recent. I've been seeing the accountant, but I think my bookkeeper is going to do a much better job this year with the amount of tax I'm paying and the deductions that I can claim. And it's good to have those people on your team too, by the way. Basically just putting the right things in. I guess I was putting my toe in the water when I did leave that organisation. Will this work? Very few people had done it. In actual fact, I don't know anyone who has. So, of course, having that network of Blindness and Beyond that we were putting together too also spurred us on. So really, networking is what I put into place.
What assistive technology do you use, Elise?
Yep, pretty much the same as I did when I started. VoiceOver on the Mac and VoiceOver on the iPhone. Sometimes a little bit of Zoom on the Mac, which, is analogous, is basically the Mac's version of Zoom text, for wanting to put it crudely. So mainly mainly speech with the Mac. Under Windows, similarly, JAWS for Windows or NVDA. My preference is for JAWS, but NVDA is a very good option for people who aren't able to access JAWS. It's more a personal choice. I could run Zoom text, but magnification tends to give me the irrits sometimes. I support it, of course, because only today I was working on a long 4-hour session with a client, and we were troubleshooting things, but teaching it too. I do like teaching Zoom text. It's an elegant program if you want to teach it. I don't do Braille, but I can recommend Braille displays. Just trying to think about. I do have a couple of small handheld video magnifiers here. But I generally use a lot of the technologies I use come in the form of apps for the iPhone, such as Seeing AI, InVision, Ira. These are iPhone apps, obviously. Voice Dream Reader for reading stuff. I think that's very elegant. It now has a Mac client with a subscription model. Voice Dream Writer, because I'm a terrible speller and I like using the tools that come with that. Notwithstanding, if I'm on the computer, I tend to still like using Word and JAWS. And if you're good on the keyboard, you can really crank out a lot of work pretty quick, even with a vision impairment. Mainly the really cool apps you can get on the iPhone. There's much more access technology than that, of course, but that's what I'm using.
Okay. Let me talk to David for a moment. David, Elise mentioned that when she's starting up her business, she had to set up a website first so that she could get a presence out, a media presence out there, and a way to promote herself and build her networks. She had to develop a system of invoicing and quoting. She had to develop a marketing system and a way of communicating with her customers. What do you think should come first, David? Proficiency in the use of your assistive technology, or proficiency in the mainstream technology, or a combination of the two? Where do you think people should start?
Look, I would truly think they should be a combination of the two, because you really can't do one without the other.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be using Microsoft Word, if you're going to be using Microsoft Edge, if you're a person that understands the web and using a web authoring tool to start building a website, then literally you have to use the assistive technology, whatever it might be, to do what you need to do. So you can't really separate the one from the other. So back in the early 90s, I used to be a bit concerned that we used to, we do JAWS training, we do Zoom text training, we do this training, we do that training. What we didn't do was do Microsoft Excel, Microsoft Word, Microsoft PowerPoint in conjunction with whatever assistive technology the person wanted to use, because it's the program at the end of the day that you're using. You're not using as such the assistive technology to be productive. It's your means by which you use a program to be productive. So, you can't walk into a workplace and go, you know what, I'm an expert JAWS user. Have you used Microsoft Word? No.
Yep.
Well, that's really good. You're good at JAWS, but unfortunately, you don't have the skills we're looking for. So, and a little bit coming off that too is that it's really good to try and be really, really flexible. So if you say, well, I'm a diehard, God help us, Internet Explorer user, when that application goes away, you've got to be flexible, because sometimes when you're in a workplace or your own business, sometimes Chrome might be best. Sometimes on the Mac that I use and Elise uses, sometimes Safari would be good. Sometimes Edge will be good. Sometimes Word will be good. Sometimes whatever else will be good. So you can't stick to the main thing of, I shall only use 1, 2, and 3, because the thing I always like to remind people, flexibility and problem solving is your key to being successful, because what you don't want to end up doing is almost using your assistive technology as an excuse about why you couldn't get something done.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? We get, I get it, and I'm sure David would in his line of work too, people coming through the door wanting to know how to use Facebook on their iPhone. Well, I want to know how to use Facebook. Yeah, that's all good. Yeah, great. But if you can't gesture on that iPhone, you're not going to be using Facebook. It's simple as that. So you've got to learn the access technology. You've got to be good at both. So a good trainer, a good access technology instructor will teach both side by side, because, as David said, you're not going to get a job if you're a good, unless you're in the game, in the biz. You're not going to get a job in a regular workplace just because you happen to know heaps of JAWS commands, but you can't get Word to run the spell checker or something. So and you need to understand those basic concepts, and that's what we teach a lot of too. And it might be a little bit laborious sometimes, but we try and make it interesting. And you really can't have one without the other.
I agree.
David, when you're mentioning how you have had that opportunity over the years to read the various job access reports, so you've had lots of experience at reading workplace assessments and recommendations and learning about all the different systems that are often used by organisations. What are there better databases, more accessible databases that you've generally that you found?
No,
some that work better?
No, there isn't.
No.
No, there isn't, because at the end of the day, this is where the problem solving and the workarounds come through. So, you wander up to any client management system or any database system, whatever it might be, and you say, okay, what do you need to do with this system? Because there is no one on this planet, like any other user. You do not use an application to its full capacity. You might, you're an invoice system. You're only there to produce invoices. You don't do stock control, nothing else. So you pick the particular task of what you need to do. You then see if you can access it. If you can't, then you might try different screen readers. So, for example, if JAWS doesn't work, try NVDA. If NVDA doesn't work, try Dolphin / Supernova. And then if that doesn't work, then you have a look at a combination of keyboard commands if the application supports them, or doing fancy things with the screen reader. And the final ultimate one is to say, can this be programmed or scripted? So can I make it accessible to a person? If I get someone, and there was a main person in Australia that does that, Michael, and he come out and he literally will script it up. So what we normally say, and a lot of times in workplace reports, we'll say this application may be accessible if it was scripted. Here's a recommendation to have a test trial script function written and see if that does the job. And in lots of cases, it works absolutely perfectly well. So just because an application doesn't work out of the box doesn't mean it's the end of the world.
And would you say, and I'll ask both of you this question, would you say that there is no such thing as a fully accessible system, software package or IT system? Hence why you're...
I've seen a few. The Microsoft CRM had issues. That's what we used in New Zealand. They've now since copied Vision Australia and gone to Salesforce. Now, Salesforce is an interesting case because, when I worked there, it was accessible, but the question is it usable? And if you put so many links to just about everything in a CRM, I'll be honest, I'm a pragmatist. I'm not there to check boxes and fill in forms all day. I've got enough on my plate worrying about my clients. So there's all these links there with heaps of jargon and all that sort of stuff. You can go, you can bring up the links list in JAWS, but are you going to click on the right one? And if you click on the right one, what's it going to do? If you look down and see, something that means something to other people, but it doesn't mean something to you, is that product really usable? Well, yes, it may not necessarily be there, because you're there to maybe, as David said on the invoicing system, to produce invoices. You're not there for stock control. I might be on the database in an organisation because I want to put in a client note, for example, but I'm not really there to fool about with whether they've got a plan manager on the NDIS. That's the people who manage the billing the billing side of it. That's not my business. So, you start asking questions. Are the users using the CRM properly, or are they using their part of the CRM to the best of their ability?
This is really interesting, because both of you are reinforcing something that came up in webinar 1 of this series about some of the attributes of someone with an entrepreneurial mindset. And one of the qualities is ability to be able to problem solve and be resilient in the face of challenges. So, David, you've really made that point. And your point there, Elise, about not being single focused, having to be singularly focused about what is your core business versus, shall I be stretched and pulled in this every other direction, and that takes me away from my core business.
Exactly. Like I say in business, it's okay. Like you don't get this privilege when you work for an organisation, but you do when you're in business. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, I'm not doing that billing business. I'm not doing this accounting business. I'm going to pay somebody. Because one of the things I learned when I did a business course over 20 years ago now, if you can't do something, or if you don't know how to do something, or if you simply don't want to do something, then employ someone. Because there's plenty of people out there who will give their right arm to do the stuff you don't want to do. Absolutely. You won't have a problem finding somebody. Now, obviously, when you're starting a business, you might have trouble paying them because now paying is a big thing. So there's a couple of ways around it. You can invite them around for dinner. You can contra it. You can, say, look, when I've got the money, I'll give you some money. Can you help me get off the ground? And by the time I'm now 4 years into my business nearly, so I do have funds to hire the bookkeeper and to pay the bookkeeper. I can pay the accountant. I can pay the copywriter, Kylie. I can pay her to write my reports if I don't want to do it. Having said that, though, last couple that I've done on my own seem to have worked out quite well. Thank you, NDIS, for the said participants. So, again, I get to choose, will I write that or will I not? And it depends on how much work, my own stress levels at the time. You don't get that privilege when you're in an organisation because they'll say, well, it's just part of your job. Well, I don't believe in that. I think the fact is if the right people are put into the right places, you'll get a lot more productivity because, as I've said to managers in the past, there's plenty of people out there who would give their right arm to do some of the stuff I'm having trouble doing. And if you hand it on to them, I'll have more time to do the things I can do, and we'll all make a lot more money. So it's just it's pretty obvious if you ask me. Don't put the wrong people, you can't put round pegs in square holes. So I would say this to whether you're a large organisation or a small organisation, employ the right people in the right jobs. And that's what business allows you to do. So I've done that. I could, let me think. Yeah, I could now go out and if I didn't want to do the changes I want to do on my website, I could pay somebody to do them because I don't really want to be doing websites. I just had the skill and I thought, well, I was starting out, so I basically had to do it. But, Kylie's written a lot of content for that. Which is really cool. But if I want to spruce it up a bit, I might actually pay somebody to do it in future. So it's adding to your team. It's building your own team, and I think that really goes a long way to making your business successful.
Thanks, Elise. I think that's a good key point for people to take away with them.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but it's okay to say I need help.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. David, you mentioned, actually, I can't remember if it was you or Elise, but you both seem to be in agreement about the concept of accessibility and usability. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How as a business owner who is blind or vision impaired, how can we ensure that we're building enough of a skill set, one, for us to run our own business, but two, to be able to choose or master or work with systems that aren't necessarily made for us?
Yeah, basically it's networking. So you talk to as many people as you can. And it doesn't matter if it's an individual or an organisation, a blindness organisation or not. Go on emailing lists, go on the internet, listen to radio podcasts, talk to people that you know. Because the more information you get, the better off you are. And people might say, oh, look, I heard of an application a couple of years ago. That was a really good one. You might want to try that one. Or this one hasn't been updated for a while, so it might have lost a bit of accessibility and function. So the best, so if somebody says, oh, look, you should be using Y, then you go, well, that's okay. I'll check out why, but if it doesn't work, I'll pop over to Z, or I'll just go back to the beginning of the alphabet and start all over again. And the other thing too is nobody says you have to use an application that's for the business. So somebody says, oh, they shan't use an accountancy program. Well, you know what? I'm going to go and use an Excel spreadsheet, or I'm going to use numbers on the Mac. Or somebody else says, oh, look, you better use, if you're a Mac user, you better use Pages, or you better use Word, or you better do this, and you better do that. Sometimes as long as you get the content down or the information, that's fine. So what a lot of people tend to do, for example, writing reports, I know that what I tend to do is, particularly when I'm actually evaluating a particular product, I will write down all the content. I'll put it in point form and I'll do basic headings. And then what I normally say to people is, if you want to look at tonight, look visually pretty and laid out well, you go and do it, because I honestly don't have the time to sit there and proofread and double check with JAWS to make sure it's all nice. I'm an expert in evaluating in content. I'm not an expert in documentation presentation. So like Elise was saying, I do what I do best. And then what I think I don't need to do, I then give to somebody else to do. And that doesn't mean I'm devaluing myself. I'm, not being a quote really independent blind person, because lots of other quote non-blind or non-low vision people do exactly the same thing. You subcontract out the stuff that other people have the skills for, and you just do what you do best. So that's exactly what I do, because somebody gave me a form about a couple of months ago, and like Elise, it was a very, very long form. It was tabular based. I thought, my goodness, if I start entering data into this form and I start stuffing up the cells by deleting stuff and re-entering stuff, I'm going to spend so much time navigating the form that I won't get the evaluation done in time. So what I did was I copied the field names out of the form, produced my own Word document, and I did it in Word. And I gave the person the Word document and said, knock yourself out. You can put this stuff in the form, or guess what? You can either use my form. It's got exactly the same fields in it.
I've said that to people too. And because we used to mess around with the old NDIS, assessment template, and that would jump around and flick. And then I found out it was doing it to the sighted people as well as it was the screen reader people. I found out when I left that organisation, I could have done with that knowledge when I was there, I must admit, because it was hard for everybody. I just think even now, I think that's even Kylie had to do it recently to a form where to put it all in.
Is Kylie a sighted?
Kylie's totally blind. She's a very good JAWS user. She's in New Zealand, so she's having trouble with it too. So rip out the form field headings and the headings, put it all into a text file or a Word document, and then we put it back at the end of the day.
So this is another attribute of having an entrepreneurial mindset: is one, you don't take no for an answer, and two, you become innovative. Don't make yourself fit to the system. Make the system fit you.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
Because, at the end of the day, clients don't care if you're sitting in the office writing reports, ticking boxes, crossing in forms and submitting this and clicking the submit button and stressing out because the form you submitted that comes back and it's, got wrong things in it. They don't care if you're having a wrangle with somebody back at the office. They don't care about that. What they care about, in my business anyway, is you sitting in front of them, showing them how to fix their JAWS, or showing them how to use their JAWS or their Zoom text or whatever. Like today, I had to ring up, and this is the other thing, pulling in more resources. Let's pull in Danny Keogh from Quantum, because we had what appeared, which actually isn't, but we went through a troubleshooting process, what appeared on the surface to be a JAWS problem. When the three of us got our heads together, myself, the client, and Danny, it was a case of, it was pretty obvious that it's actually something running on that machine causing the main shell of Windows, which is Explorer, to reload, which is what's sending JAWS drunk on the home screen, but so to speak, and making it read garbage. But it took us a few phone calls and a couple of hours to get to that point. So we all have to work together and go through a troubleshooting process. Now, I would have preferred to have been teaching the commands and doing the proper lesson, but this problem arose, and it's part and parcel of running access technology on something like Windows or even Mac. You are going to get unexpected results, particularly in the PC environment where PCs are different. I was fortunate enough to have a computer with exactly the same hardware profile as the client. So I was able to prove that, well, we know it can work on these computers. It's just that there's something running on their machine that's not running on my machine that's causing JAWS to yield unexpected results. So in this instance, JAWS wasn't the problem, it was the symptom.
Actually, Robin, that's another good point too. We talked about problem solving in looking at different applications and that sort of stuff, but there's another one too, is you've got to be prepared to do problem solving and troubleshooting yourself or with somebody else. Because literally, if it doesn't work the first, second, third time, I can guarantee that you're going to have to keep going to the fourth, sixth, seventh, or eighth time to get it resolved in whatever manner you need to do. And that requires patience. So rather than getting frustrated and feel like throwing the thing out the window, you look at it, you try and solve it, you try and do workarounds, you try and do other solutions and get it done. Because at the end of the day, I can guarantee as a blind person myself, there's lots of things that, I've spent maybe 4 hours one day trying to solve something, and then I ended up having to do a workaround because I couldn't solve it. But I still got it resolved because I ended up with a workaround anyway. So, and that's the thing to be very patient about is it's frustrating, I know, and it's really irritating when you feel like you're wasting time, but life's not fair sometimes, and that's just what we need to do as independent blind people, is to have enough energy to be able to do that.
The workaround's pretty simple for this particular client, and that's pretty much where we left it. However, that said, like sometimes the machine does decide to work properly, but it's a small problem. Hitting the control key will shut JAWS up. But the thing is, it's where the focus lands at any particular point. And this is one of the things that we teach, very fundamental things in access technologies. Be aware whether you're using Mac, VoiceOver on the Mac, VoiceOver on the iPhone, JAWS, NVDA under Windows. You need that fundamental knowledge of what focus is and where it is at any given time. Even in the case of this problem we had today, even get the focus to land on the taskbar when you unlock the computer, all's well anyway. So all you got to do is go window, every now and again, just go Windows T or something, and bingo, you got the problem solved. So in this case, it's partly fixed itself for some strange reason. The other part of the resolution will be through the workaround, and it's not going to stop this client from learning how to use Chrome with JAWS or learning how to use Word and Outlook with JAWS. It's not going to actually, this particular issue isn't going to cause them a problem really at the end of the day. So sometimes you just got to make those compromises. You can build two Windows boxes out of the same computer, out of the same hardware, and get completely different results. I've done it for years. They're almost like electronic fish tanks. You can get two fish tanks, put them together, put fish in both, weeds and plants in some, and you'll create two different ecosystems. The same thing happens with two different Windows machines. Same hardware profile, you'll get two different results after a little while of somebody running this on it, running that on it, and installing this, doing that, configuring this, chopping that, changing that. You'll end up with almost two different machines that run very differently.
Yes, that's a really good point. And let's end there because we're just on 7:40 Melbourne time. So before I hand over to any questions, I just wanted to say I'm very heartened, Elise and David, by what you've just said, but also frustrated and disappointed because I'm heartened that you, both subject matter experts in the area of adaptive technology, have validated for me that even you, who I consider the gurus, even you get frustrated and have these challenges and you've had to do problem solving, etc. But I'm disappointed because I want the easy fix. I want to be able to just go, hey, expert, fix this problem for me. So I'm saying that tongue in cheek though, because I actually think
bear in mind the reason we do what we do is because we've had those war stories. I'm sure we could sit here all night and talk about this frustrating problem with JAWS or that frustrating with Ventrilo when I was back at Cisco, and some other frustrating problem with the Mac here, and then somebody updated an operating system there, and then all of a sudden the amount of beta testing that David and I have done, when they break Braille in just about every version of iOS as a beta, we just accept it now. We just know they're going to bust Braille. It's going to take them several different versions of iOS to get that right. I don't know why they do it, but they manage to do it every year.
Just on that note, that
Yep.
would be perfect. We'll just move on to
Yep.
a question. I do have a couple of hands up
Lovely.
and some questions that have come through the email as well. We'll move on to Debbie. Debbie, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, hello. Just wanting to know from you, Elise, what is the software you use for invoicing? I'm not sure, I might have missed it, or do you use Xerox or one of those?
Oh, right. Yep. No, I use QuickBooks. The reason I chose QuickBooks was because I had a totally blind colleague who does a similar role to me in Brisbane using it at the time, and he sat here in my living room when he was down in Melbourne and produced an invoice on his iPhone. So that's why I use QuickBooks. A lot of people are pushing Xero at the moment. I don't know whether it's any better than when it was. I saw it years ago back in New Zealand, and I wasn't really taken by its accessibility or lack thereof. But and that's half the thing. Everyone's saying to me, why are you still using QuickBooks? Well, because it's accessible. And Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks, are actually investing into Ira to promote their free. If you ring up with a business or a resume or something you need to be done, and you get those free business type IRA calls. That's all sponsored by Intuit. So I feel like it's my way of giving back, and also it works for me, and I can access it with the Mac and the PC with the standard JAWS or voiceover keystrokes.
So do you actually buy that, or
it's a web interface, and it's QuickBooks Online, and it's costing me about $35 a month, and it does pretty much everything I need. There's a plan below and I think a plan above the one I've got, all offering various different services. I've chosen the one I have very, very quickly. I don't want to take up the whole thing, but because somebody said, you need the plan lower than what you got, and I said, no, I need actually something that's going to handle hours. Because NDIS talk in hours, you'll get a report, you got so many hours for, cleaning and gardening, and so many hours for therapy, which is where we come under, so many hours for this. So when I produce an invoice based on a figure per hour, I need to be able to quote hours. I worked for 2 hours or 3 hours or 2.5 hours or 1 hour, whatever the case was. So
thank you.
Thanks for your question,
You're welcome.
Debbie. That was really good, really useful.
All right, so we'll move on to BCWA have their hand up.
You actually touched on, I'm looking for a, CRM program, customer relationships management. And you did say Salesforce is accessible, but not exactly that usable.
Well, Salesforce is a typical program where it can be configured to the needs of the organisation. Like when I was at Vision Australia, they obviously had it customised, and David could probably talk to this point a bit more, to their needs, and it's very, very customised. But it's, it was all full of stuff I really didn't want to know about. It was full of stuff that made no sense to me. So, and that's a big corporate thing. I don't know how they would go supporting a small business. Now, there is another CRM. See, the thing is with QuickBooks, it's actually not a CRM, it's an account program. There is a CRM, I'll have to look it up and get in touch with you, that's specifically designed for small businesses. I know a couple of the O&Ms are using it, and who also offer support services. Those systems where you might book a time like a dentist or a doctor's appointment, and you get those text messages saying you have booked in with blah, 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 your appointment's on Thursday at 10 o'clock. etc. Click, tap here or click here to change, reschedule, or reply with yes or no. There's a system that does that. I don't know how accessible it is, and I've forgotten the name of it, so I do apologise, but they do exist, and I can get in touch with your list to let you know. As I said, I've not used it, but one of my colleagues in the Blindness and Beyond network is using it, but they're sighted. They're one of our sighted colleagues, so we've not had any accessibility testing on it. So that's the difference. It sounds like you're looking for a CRM, client resource management system, or CMS, however you want to put it, as opposed to an accounting package. Would that be correct?
That's right, yeah. Do you know much about Xero then for accounting packages?
No, but I can put you on to somebody who does.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one that I tend to use more than QuickBooks.
Yeah, well, it's probably accessible by now. So
Yeah,
I'm
it's
assuming you're using it, what, with JAWS and Windows?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, I can get you help with, I couldn't give you help with Xero because I don't want to give anyone help with accounting packages because I pay people to do my accounting. I'm one of, as I said, don't want to do it. Don't understand it. It's all befuddles me. I'm an access technologist, not an accountant, not a bookkeeper, not a tax consultant, but I will pay those who are.
I actually have paid an invoice with Xerox, Xero, I mean, and actually it works quite well with JAWS. I've actually followed the prompts. I didn't want to cut in too much, but I just thought it was relevant to do that.
Did you pay an invoice that was sent to you, or did you?
Yeah, no, I paid one that was sent to me.
Oh,
no,
well, yeah. Well, of course, that's going to be accessible. You know, they're going to send out. They're going to send out an email with an invoice, and it says, with a nice big fat link, a button in the middle of the page. It says "Pay here."
Not necessarily. I wouldn't.
They all do that.
I don't assume that. I've actually found sometimes things aren't accessible, even if you are meant to pay it. Yeah.
But what Zalahar's trying to tell us, ask about is, the comment is it accessible for us in the back end? So you're seeing the front end of the system, that's the invoice, and they all produce PDF invoices anyway. So, if you can't pay by clicking their link, you can get the PDF and read it and then, do a bank transfer, which is how most people pay mine anyway. But the fact is that's the front end of the system. The back end of the system is what the business owner needs. And somebody like Zal, who's obviously running a small business, would be running in the back end and producing those invoices or managing her clients within that invoicing system.
David, I'm curious, have you had any experience with clients using Xero?
No, I haven't. No,
Oh, wow.
I'm a bit like Elise. I've just stayed right away from accounting programs. There used to be a program a long time ago called Cash Manager from New Zealand.
The Cash Manager. Yeah, but I think
they put a lot of work into it, but I think it's sort of gone now.
Yeah, they did that 10 years ago, didn't they? Yeah,
that's right. And look, like Alex is saying, you find out people that use stuff already. Like Adam Morris's, Elise's, whatever else, Mark Muscat and so on. Find what they use, what assistive technology they use it with, and have a go at that first. So again, it gets back to that networking that you ask or find out as many people as you can, and then go and pursue it. And somebody normally has an answer for you.
It was Mark who sat in my living room who did the invoice. So that was, again, one of my colleagues from Blindness and Beyond. So I thought, well, Mark's done a lot of the legwork already. So why reinvent the wheel if you know somebody and trust somebody? They've already, it's been accessible, and he's been working. I think he did a bit of work with the developers anyway. So he's done a lot of the heavy lifting. So why reinvent the wheel? Just go with what Mark said in that case,
Yep.
David, just asking you as well, once the CRM system, Salesforce, was customized for Vision Australia, was it usable, or did you still have to get some scripting done for it to be usable?
I didn't have to get no scripting done, but they certainly did a lot of tweaks behind the scenes. So we had an internal access technology person who people might know very well, Nick Allen.
Yeah,
he was always doing work in the background because sometimes the drop-down boxes wouldn't work, or usually what happens is when they put a new feature in, they break the existing code, of course, like anything happens, and then they've got to fix it again. So that's the problem with Salesforce. It's so customizable that sometimes the customization actually breaks the access technology. And then you've got to start all over again. So that was always the problem with, or still is the problem with Salesforce, that it's fantastic, but it's that functional thing that Elise was talking about. When you've got so many links on the screen, I'd almost prefer some sort of web-based interface for client management than an application any day, because at least with web interface, you've got a little bit more chance of making things a little bit more accessible and certainly a lot more fast. Certainly a lot faster to use it as well.
Forms. I've had a lot of trouble with forms. I'm sort of really favouring HTML, forms that are done online. But what would be your advice if someone's saying, make forms accessible via Word or PDF?
What I'd suggest, if you can do it, I'd say HTML form any day.
Probably any day.
Because-
Yeah, I agree. And you know, you can use the tags that come in HTML, or if you want to use ARIA, you can. And either way, you can produce a very quickly produce a form that flies with any screen reader. Really, wouldn't you agree, David?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Thanks, Sal, for your questions. I think a lot of us will find that quite useful. But Christina, do we have some more questions?
Yep, I do. So another question is, someone is asking and wondering if Vision Australia can assist with setting up a business or customizing software to run a business.
Let me say no as far as setting up an application is concerned, because that's where scripting and everything else comes in. So where you start off from is that you identify the application that you want to use. I would then approach Job Access and get somebody to come out, do an assessment, and then, like I said before, do the scripting of the actual application. As far as, configuring an application and setting up and all that sort of stuff, that's not something that Vision Australia would do, but we would certainly, subcontract to people to do looking at scripting for an application.
Yes,
David.
Thank you. Another question that's come through is for Elise. How much has the NDIS been a benefit to you and supported you with your business?
Interesting question. Not a great deal, only because that's the way I set it up. It's not an indictment on the NDIS by saying that. I did use a support worker to show me around some of the lovely inaccessible applications, courtesy of our friends from Adobe, that make accessible work, but the actual back end of them aren't terribly accessible. So I used a support worker because I'm self-managed on the NDIS, so I used a support worker to do that. I've had a few people drive me to get things for my business, but the NDIS doesn't play a major part in my business at all. It could do if I had other needs, but sometimes I've bought stuff, the low-cost consumables. In actual fact, I did buy the reading machine that came through the NDIS, the Read Easy Evolve. Oh, and I do have to admit to using the NDIS to relicense JAWS and Zoom Text or Fusion. And I just did that back in April, so I'm now licensed up to 2024. So I was able to put 2023 in last week, which was pretty cool. So it has helped in that respect. Yeah. So I guess there's two ways I can pay for anything. Well, that is very definitely NDIS-able, for want of a better word, because it's access technology and you needed to keep the license up to date, because we all know what happens if you let your JAWS license get out of date. It costs a small king's ransom to bring it up to date when you eventually get to the point where you have to bring it up to date. So it's best to try and maintain it. There are small ticket items like AirPods that are possible, or certain headphones, if that you think might be okay because they're safer to use. You could argue, as I said, I can buy some things through the NDIS that are NDIS-able if it's reasonable and necessary, or I can buy things through my business that are claimable from the tax. And most of what I have bought on the business, like the computers and stuff, have been bought through the claimable on the tax option, because the NDIS aren't there to fund mainstream items such as regular computers. And we all know we still need a regular computer on which to base our access technology if we're running screen readers and braille devices and magnifiers and all that sort of stuff. So it's been there in the background, but it's not been a big thing. But it can be really cool for things like your JAWS licenses and that sort of stuff. And very small consumable, low cost items. And as I said, using the support worker, especially if I need to go somewhere, or not so much that these days, but when I was trying to deal with all the Adobe stuff, and I've not done that for a while myself. So as I said, it's a small part, but not a very big part.
Thanks, Elise. We'll need to end things there, Christina, unless there are any other questions.
No, that's it. So a big thank you to Robin and to our guests this evening. We look forward to our next webinar, which is Financing Your Business, where we will look at opportunities to finance your business through small business loans, community grants, government subsidies, allowances, and other supports available to people with disability. In addition, we have a special offer from Bill Lang, Director of Small Business Australia. Bill has generously offered a small number of free 12-month subscriptions to Business Advantage Online for any business owners who are blind or vision impaired, allowing unlimited access to an online community for networking and resources, webinars, training, advice, and support. And this is valued at $500. So attendees at tonight's webinar can contact BCA at bca.org.au to take advantage of this fantastic offer. Finally, additional information and resources are available at the nitothefuture.com.au website. You can also access a podcast series on the New Horizons feed featuring stories from successful business owners, including Elise, who are blind or vision impaired, to inspire and motivate you on your business ownership journey. And we hope you will join us again for the remaining webinars in this series.